Good evening, everybody. Again, we're now live on the webcast. Welcome to the meeting of the Western Area Planning Committee. My name is Councillor David Beeman, and I'm chairman of this committee. Members and officers, please keep your hands, raise your hand to indicate that you wish to speak. Please keep your microphone on mute when you are not speaking. Please, can I ask also any questions get brief and to the point. We will be timing speeches this evening, and an alarm will sound when you've been speaking for 4 minutes. Right. Let's go on the agenda. Number 1, apologies for absence, Kimberly.
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies for absence from councillors Dear and Hess.
James, I think.
I hadn't received an apology from Councillor James, but as she's not here, we will make a presumption. Councillor Hyman is here as a substitute. Thank you.
Minutes of the last meetings. Can the committee approve the minutes of the meetings held on the 22nd and 28th of June, as published on the council's website? That's correct. Declarations of interest. Anybody wish to declaration of interest?
Yes, it's an explanation really, because I did place a comment. I'm substituting for Councillor Hesson this morning. I was going through the documents and I found that there was a document missing from the application record, and made a comment online which should not be taken as in favour or against, as a simple statement of law. And I have also written to the borough solicitor asking for him to clarify for members the position in respect of the public's right to be consulted upon application documents, including appropriate assessments specifically, which appeared mid-afternoon. After that point, so well, I'm clarifying for the sake of clarity, in case people think, oh, he has made a comment and that appears to be an objection. It's a statement of fact and it was a comment, and so I'm just clarifying that matter.
Thank you very much.
None, Chairman.
Questions from members?
None, Chairman.
Any relevant updates to government guidance or legislation since the last meeting?
Thank you, Chairman. No, there aren't any.
Right, we get on to the meat of the agenda now. The first item is a confirmation of a tree preservation order number 2/22, land to the rear of 12 Hillgarth, Beacon Hill, Hindhead, Surrey, G266B. A confirmation of tree preservation order of 2 lime trees and 1 oak tree. But the officer is Ian Bruce to present. Ian.
Thank you, Chairman. If I may share my screen. I hope you can see that.
Yes, it's coming up.
Thank you very much. Yes, 3 trees to the rear of number 12 Hillgarth, Beacon Hill, Hindhead. Recommendation is that the 3 trees are preserved with a tree preservation order without modification, and that would be 02/22 TPO. So the background is that the trees were recognised as a threat due to a planning application that was submitted back in February, WA/2021/02119. It was found that the proposal didn't include the 3 trees, and the proposal would potentially harm the trees to a point where they would become damaged by the subsequent construction. So a planning officer raised a concern, and a tree officer went out to have a look and determined that the trees that are under threat were actually had good visual amenity. The trees are of reasonable form and condition for the species and size and sufficient distance away from existing properties not to become a significant nuisance. So the interest of preserving amenity is considered expedient that trees be a subject of a TPO. So if I go further down to show you the location of the trees, they're the 3 trees here. You can see clearly where they are located, quite close to the highway. This is the aerial view. And here we are. We have got photographs from the highway itself showing the 2 lime trees seen from the highway, T1 and T2. And what was thought was a beech is now been identified as an oak tree from a second visit by a tree officer. And this is the tree looking sideways on from the highway. Note there's the full crown facing the highway, but slightly less so on the northern side facing the garden. That's because apparently a pine tree had grown there, suppressing the growth, causing the oak tree to grow towards the road more so. Doesn't mean to say that the tree's unsafe, but I can't guarantee that. I haven't inspected the tree. It would be down to the owners to inspect the tree to make sure that that tree is safe. Relevant development planning policy and legislation applies. Policy NE2, policy D6. And D6 suggests that the protection of significant trees and groups of trees by using a TPO takes into consideration the tree condition, contribution to public visual amenity appropriate to the surrounding and existing tree cover, historic and rare tree species of significance. Well, these aren't particularly rare species. There's no history behind them, but they certainly do provide a good visual amenity for the public and the residents that live near to it. Obviously, we wouldn't put TP on a tree if we found that the tree was unsafe. And Section 198 of the Town and Country Planning Act of 1990 can make trees subject to a tree preservation order where a threat to loss of good trees exists that would negatively impact upon the character of the local landscape and local view. The trees concerned were assessed in accordance with the trees adopted tree guidelines of 2012 and considered under threat following refusal of planning permission due to the potential impact the construction would have on the subject trees. Therefore, it was considered expedient in the interest of public amenity to make the trees subject to the tree preservation order. So let's just go. So this, hold on, let me just get to the, the objection has been broken down into about 5 or 6 parts. So if I briefly go over those for your information. The request, sorry, I've gone too far down. Let me go back. So objections received, letter of objection was received on the 22nd of February 2022. The relevant grounds of the objection are numbered below. And the first one, questioning amenity value of the 3 TPO trees with Gold Valley, Devil's Punch Bowl and houses with trees and shrubs considered as just as important visual amenities. And which is, yes, that's correct, but those trees are not threatened by this potential construction development within the rear garden. And so obviously a threat considered of good amenity and subsequently considered for TPO. The second point is that trees are not considered visible in comparison to Golden Valley. Well, yes, certainly Golden Valley consists of lots of trees, but these particular trees are individual trees, and I think you'd certainly miss them if they were felled or removed, as opposed to trees of similar size in a woodland where you perhaps wouldn't notice them as much as because they're a component part of a woodland. Sorry, go back again. Trees not a conservation area, this is the third objection. Not rare or historic, no assessment of the tree condition. Well, the trees don't need to be in a conservation area to be considered for TPO. They don't need to either be rare or historic, but they should be visible and they should be of prominence and significance. The tree condition is the responsibility of the tree owner. So if they are concerned about the condition of the trees, then they should employ a qualified arboriculturalist to take a look. So we've gone to objection 4. They're requesting a definition of amenity. as I understand, amenity value assessed as trees found to be pleasant, viewable from a public point of view, and residents benefit where loss would be significant. So that's a definition of amenity value with regard to TPO. Point 5, T3, it was initially considered a beach, but and there is no beach. Well, yes, that's right. Beech was identified, but unfortunately misidentified, and now subsequently has been found to be an oak tree. So a bit more robust in that respect. And that has been, that beech has now been changed to an oak tree. So there's a slight modification to this TPO. So point 6, T3, apparently it sways and the risk of falling onto the substation. Trees lean due to previous pine now removed. That was an objection there. Well, yeah, tree inspection and maintenance is the responsibility of the tree owner, as stated before. If the tree is proven to be dangerous, then appropriate action should be taken. Leaning trees do not necessarily indicate imminent tree failure. In fact, you get a lot of trees in the landscape that tend to lean away from the wind and adapt to that that environment. So if a tree suddenly leans, for example, then that could be a concern. So I don't think that is a point of a good point to use against that the recommendation of the TPO. Last point, TPO applied to trees and questioning the timing. Well, yes, the TPO was applied to the 3 trees after the planning application was submitted to the local authority. And that was recognised by case officer, who then reported it to the tree officer, and the tree officer went out and had a look and determined that the trees had good visual amenity and the threat existed had the planning application gone ahead without due consideration to the trees. Simply put, the planning application did not include the 3 trees within the planning application. Had it done so, then there could have been some method of protecting the roots, certain style of foundation that would allow for the majority of roots to remain intact, but on this occasion they were not considered in that application. So to conclude then, the objections raised against the confirmation of the tree preservation or 02/22 are not substantiated in that respect and do not override the public amenity value presented by the trees and the realistic threat to their long-term retention. And the recommendation is that the tree preservation order be confirmed without modification, albeit changing the beech to the oak tree. And that's me, Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for a very comprehensive report. Councillors, anybody wish to comment on this one? Councillor Edmonds and then Councillor Rubini. Councillor Edmonds.
Thank you very much, Chair. Initially, a bit of a concern that the tree was mistaken for a beech rather than an oak. The question I've got is, I understand that Surrey County Highways have responsibility for taking action if a tree is endangering a roadway. One, I'd like that confirmed. And the second question is, has any contact been made with the owners of the substation? Thank you.
Questions?
Thanks, Chairman. On the picture of the 2 lines, I don't know if you can show it again.
Yes.
You should be, I think, be able to answer this straight away.
Let me just
Showing me a picture of the 2.
hold on. Let me just share my screen again. Hold on. Share screen. Okay.
That's it, that's the one.
Yeah.
In the middle, it's almost as if there's another, so it's 3 trees. Does that come from that initial tree, or is that a smaller one that could be taken? What exactly is that middle one?
I believe that's part of the second tree joined at the base. So it's not, having not actually gone out and had a look close Sorry, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry, yes, sorry, Chairman. Yes, no, that could be a third tree, but having not actually looked at the trees in person, I couldn't say, but it looks like it's a codominant part of that T2 tree, the second tree in the line. But I think if you lose that slender tree there, you're possibly opening up, but it would have to be it'd have to be assessed by a tree surgeon, an arboriculturalist. Potentially you could lose that, but it may cause a bit of a gap, possibly, and then rendering the other two trees more at risk of wind throw. But I cannot confirm that actually is part of the T2 tree, but it certainly looks like it could possibly co-join at the base.
Okay, well, Councillor Edmonds, since we got you, Councillor Edmonds posed 2 questions. Could you answer both of those, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. That would be with regard to the beech tree now on oak. Yes, unfortunately, that tree was first looked at during the winter without leaf, and I think that's where this mistake had been taken place. Fortunately, we had the right location, but the wrong species. So the right species now, and the substation owner's not sure, but I'm sure that if the substation persons were responsible and thought that tree was a danger, then they would contact the owners and have that remediated. That tree is actually leaning away from the substation, so if it did happen to fail, it's more likely to go across the highway. The highway, Surrey County Council tend to look for dangerous trees along the highway, including their own trees, obviously. If they notice that a tree is in effect a dangerous tree, and that tends to be a tree that's clearly dead without any leaves, stag-headed, then they would tend to contact the owners through a letter drop or some way of notifying them and explain to them that Highways Act Section 154 applies and that they should take immediate action to remove the tree within, I think it's 21 days. But as I saw on the site there, it looked like a good, healthy tree. Unfortunately, a pine tree's been lost, so you've got an asymmetric tree, but gradually over time, if it's left intact, it should start to fill out that part of it, of the crown that was suppressed. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, Councillor Edmonds. Thank you very much. Councillor Keane.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I don't have any problem with 2 of the trees, but I mean, I'm a bit concerned about this leaning tree. I mean, I know that our expert has just said that he doesn't think it'll fall down, but you know, it is leaning a fair old way across. And, you know, I do have concerns about that because it's TPO'd now. So the onus is on them now to keep an eye on that and to have it regularly checked. So, you know, 2 out of 3, no problem with, but I am concerned about that one.
Councillor wish to speak? No. Councillor Keane, I think your questions have been really answered actually already by Mr. Brewster. So I think we can move to the recommendation. The recommendation being that Tree Preservation Order 2/22 be confirmed without modification. Those in favour, please raise their hands. Against? Abstain? Please.
Thank you, Chairman. The recommendation has 10 in favour, none against and no abstentions, so therefore carried.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much, Ian. Good night.
Thank you, Chairman. Good night.
Okay, right, we move on. Now, I'll deal with it in some sort of order, I think. The next item is in fact application WA 2022-00386, the land at 12 Uphill Road, Farnham, GU9 ONU, erection of 3 dwellings and a relocation of the existing site entrance. Now, I think before we deal with the officer report, we've had a comment from, yes, Ms. Councillor Hyman, yes?
Well, actually, there's a couple of issues here. The first one, if I can just step back 20 seconds, I think the result of the last vote was 10-0-0, and I think there's 11 of us. So if we can just check that to just because things could look odd after the next count if they don't add up the same. Well, thank you. I think this should be taken actually as a point of order because it's in relation to the law and whether we need to consult the public on appropriate assessment, because one turned up this afternoon. I noticed this morning there was no appropriate assessment for the application for 12 Upper Hale Road, which the council's responsibility to do and put online and consult upon. And it turned up about 2:30, I think, this afternoon with a letter that was timed at 1 o'clock this afternoon from Natural England. My concern is that the law gives the public the right to consultation, and this has to be either refused or deferred on the basis that members haven't had the opportunity, and the public haven't had the opportunity to check whether the appropriate assessment is a lawful appropriate assessment. And I did ask that Waverley's lawyer, Stephen Ricks, the new borough solicitor, advise on this. I realise it's the last thing. I mean, this happened this afternoon. It's not as though I delayed my intervention in this, but it is a matter of that I believe we should defer because in the circumstances, members simply cannot be certain and have they've got the convincing evidence necessary because they haven't had the opportunity to look, and neither have the members of the public. Alternatively, we can refuse on the basis that it's incomplete, which it is, but members don't necessarily know that for themselves.
Thank you. Well, we've got Lewis somewhere. Lewis is on the line.
Sorry, Chairman, that's exactly what I was going to say. We do have a lawyer. When we get an answer, we can move on.
Yeah, exactly. But Lewis, you're on the line. You should respond to Councillor Hyman.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just confirm that you can hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kimberly. I think members can proceed to consider and determine the application tonight. The habitats regulations do say that if the council consider it appropriate, they should take the opinion of the general public. And although I accept that we would normally try to get these appropriate assessment documents online and available for viewing by the public as early as possible, I don't think the fact that this particular document has been added late should mean that the members can't determine the application. I think that's particularly the case here because this is a standard application where a contribution, I think, is being paid in accordance with our avoidance strategy. So for that reason, and also given the fact that was summarised in the officer report, I don't think there's going to be any prejudice to any third parties as a result of us or the committee tonight determining the matter. I would also like to remind Councillor Hyman just to be conscious of whether he has a prejudicial interest in the matter tonight and whether he is predetermined. Obviously, that's for him to make a judgment on, but I think it's something that he should consider carefully. Thank you.
Does any of the council wish to...
Chairman, if I may come back on that, as I think that warrants a point of personal explanation, if not a further comment. I had in my email earlier pointed out to the borough solicitor, which I circulated to all the members here, that paragraph 39 of the Sweetman ruling effectively adds to the Aarhus Convention rules to what Mr. Lewis Jones has just referred to, where obviously there are circumstances where you don't need to consult the public if you're simply going to turn around and say, well, we haven't got the evidence necessary and therefore consent cannot be because it hasn't been provided by the applicant. Nobody would object to that because it's a simple statement of fact and therefore you don't need to consult. So there always are circumstances where it is not required that you consult, but paragraph 39 of the Sweetman and People Over Wind ruling states, and it states the right of the public to be involved in the process and to be consulted on appropriate assessments, which comes through Aarhus and through a judgment of 2016, which is Leso-Ekrenesk of Zoskopienie, which is I think a Polish case, which is referred to in the judgment of People Over Wind. And I would expect that perhaps Mr. Jones could refer to that before he decides that it is okay to proceed without any public consultation on the document, because I think we all know that actually the documents are put on the website for the residents to be consulted upon and to comment upon, and to turn up at 2:30 in the afternoon, I think is unacceptable, and the law says it's unacceptable, and that's the position I have to take. It is not. I simply have to go by what the law tells us here, and by what rulings there are. So and certainly it's not a matter of that I would have any personal interest or prejudicial interest in this. We are bound by Nolan principles. That's my interest. Thanks.
Right. Councillor Coburn.
I mean, I know it's up to individual members to declare an interest, but if you're saying you can't possibly make it, you are declaring an interest. You have to say that you've declared an interest. Otherwise, it makes no sense, Councillor Hyman.
Just one step at a time, actually. Councillor Hyman's report that we deferred. Has he got a seconder? Second, Councillor Hyman, to defer this item from.
Sorry, are you saying that I have proposed that we defer, that I propose a deferral, and do I have a seconder? Is that what you're asking?
I think I am, yes.
Okay, I haven't asked. Would anybody second deferral for consultation on the appropriate assessment, as is required by law?
Well, I can't see anybody, Councillor Hyman, I'm afraid. Therefore, I think we move on, don't we? Site entrance. I'm going for Lara Davison, who's going to present the report. Thank you, Lara.
Thank you, Chair. I have one verbal update for members this evening, that Natural England have reviewed the appropriate assessment and have raised no objection. The application seeks permission for the erection of 3 dwellings and the relocation of the existing site entrance at 12 Upper Hill Road in Farnham. The application site is outlined in red on the above location plan, with access gained from Upper Hill Road. The application site is located within the developed area of Farnham. Here is an aerial photograph of the site showing the surrounding plot sizes within the local area, and the plot, with the curtilage of 12 Upper Hill Road shown within the centre of the photograph, as you can see on the slide above. This slide shows some site visit photographs. The top left photograph shows the flank elevation of 12 Upper Hill Road. The top right photograph shows the front elevation of 12 Upper Hill Road, as if you were standing at the bottom of the existing site entrance. The bottom left photograph is taken looking towards the rear garden area of 12 Upper Hill Road, and the bottom right one is taken from across the road with 14 Upper Hill Road shown on the left-hand side. Here are 4 further photographs of the site. The top left photo is taken from within the application site looking across the road. Top right photograph is taken on the southeastern corner of the plot looking towards number 12. The bottom left photograph is taken from the existing access, and the bottom right photo is taken looking towards the positioning of the 3 dwellings. These photographs, the top left photograph is taken from the rear of the site, and the top right and the bottom left photograph is taken looking towards 77 Willow Way. The final bottom right photograph is taken looking towards 8 Upper Hill Road. Here is a block plan of the proposed development. As you can see, 3 new dwellings are proposed, which follow the existing building line of the dwellings as you travel down and along Upper Hill Road. Here's a more detailed site plan of the proposed scheme, which highlights the separation distance of 2.1 metres between the neighbouring dwellings, between house A, B and C. The parking is provided to the front, with the access moved more centrally within the plot. This slide shows the proposed elevations of the 3 new dwellings. External materials would consist of clay tiles, timber windows painted white and an oak framed porch. The dwelling would be similar in style and design to the host dwelling. These slides show the floor plans of the proposed dwellings. As you can see, there are 3 first floor side windows proposed. Both the ensuite and the bathroom windows would be conditioned to be obscurely glazed. The third window would serve as a staircase. This slide shows the proposed street scene, indicating how the dwellings would fit within the surrounding area and the proposed landscaping to accommodate the development. This slide shows the parking swept path analysis, which has been reviewed by the County Highway Authority, who've raised no objections subject to appropriate conditions. The key matters for consideration this evening are the design and impact on visual amenity, the impact on residential amenity, and parking. Officers consider that the provision of 3 dwellings in this location is in accordance with the development plan and are recommending approval of the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Laura. Well, one public speaker tonight. Well, I presume is the person in the public area. Mr. Adrian Genzani, I think that's the right way. Mr. Genzani, you have 4 minutes when you start speaking. Oh, yes, please. Yes, please. Thank you. Mr. Genzani. Yeah.
Thank you. Right. Chairman, councillors, members of the public. I am a small local builder and have worked in the Farnham area for the past 30 years and lived in the community for 40 years. I have from time to time developed infill plots around Farnham, probably a dozen over this time, which with other small local developers like me, reduces the pressure to grant larger greenfield sites around the Waverley area to large national builders, which I think is a good thing. The planning officer has clearly laid out the case in favour of this application, and several professional consultees have declared no objection to the scheme. I would just like to stress a few points regarding the application. The Highway Authority have no objections and feel the houses will not significantly increase traffic levels. It's important to note the new driveway location is much safer than the existing one, with greatly improved sight lines. In terms of vehicle movements, the thing which we liked about the site is that it has great local amenities on its doorstep. Shops, schools, pubs, Farnham Park and the town centre are all within walking or cycling distance, and buses are readily available too. The current trend towards working from home, the site has very good high-speed broadband available, will further reduce the need for car usage. For car journeys that are necessary, the houses will have electric charging points to help reduce carbon emissions. There is an extensive planting scheme which includes planting of mixed native hedging and tree groups to the front of the site, including 3 semi-mature street scene trees, which will be approximately 5 metres in height and 20 centimetres in girth at the time of planting. The existing mature hedging around the perimeter of the site will be protected and maintained at all times. Indeed, we have already planted a new Photinia hedge following the work that was agreed on the previous planning permission 00468. I hope to make the front of this site a credit to the street scene along the Upper Hale Road. These are substantial new 3-bed houses sitting in generous plots with well-hedged gardens. They offer plenty of living and garden amenity space. The houses are well spaced with over 2 meters separation between them. They are not cramped on the site, but sit comfortably, optimizing the use of the space as good development should. As Lara Davison has said, the new houses follow the basic design of the existing property and follow the fall of the road. We will use a mixture of external finishes, tile hanging, brickwork and timber cladding, all being used to create interesting and varied front elevations. In conclusion, I hope that you will support the opinions of the professionals consulted and the planning officer and grant permission this evening and allow me to deliver 3 new high quality, energy efficient, much needed family houses for the Waverley area. In so doing, you will provide work to local trades, local subcontractors, and that's good in terms of carbon footprint because materials and workers being local, and it's also good for the Waverley economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nianzani. Right.
Good evening, Chair. Thank you. I think this is a, excuse me.
You can, you can, Councillor Dixon, go on. It's all right, carry on.
Good evening, thank you, Chairman. Okay, so I'm from Upper Hale and I live about 9 minutes from this site. I know it particularly well because when my parents relocated from France previous year, they moved to a flat shortly to here, and I've walked past this site dozens of times with my mum and the dog. So I do know it really well. So today I'm trying to represent what the people who live along here think, and we have had a number of complaints. This diagram that the officers got out, I wonder actually, could you put up the diagram which is on page 36, the one before this one? Yes, that one. We've had complaints from neighbours at number 8, because yes, while there is a gap of 2 meters from the edge of the 3rd house to the fence, and that may or may not be a hedge, it's not a hedge at the moment, you can then see that actually they've got a very, very large garden room on the side of their house, which is, and actually the issue is that these houses are on a slope and there appears to be some levelling gone on the land. From the photographs we saw, it probably wasn't obvious to everyone. This is a very steep road. It's at the bottom of Upper Hale Road. If you've ever driven down there, it's like a little drain right at the very end, and cars really rattle down it quite fast, including the Sainsbury's delivery vans, which are among the only HGVs which are allowed on the Upper Hill Road. So they're racing past there. It's a very fast piece of road and it's quite steeply sloped. So these houses, number 8 is considerably further down the hill than number 12. So the fact that this house is going to be built right next to it, it's going to be overshadowing their conservatory. And while that might not be a planning consideration, I think it does a substantial impact on the light on number 8. The other thing to look at is number 77. Number 77 have got a very big garden at the back. And while it's said that the new houses will not be looking into any of the bedrooms or rooms of number 77, you've got 2 gardens now looking straight into the garden of number 77. And the other thing is, while these are lovely gardens, they're about 20 meters long, but they're sort of they're quite small gardens which lend themselves extremely well to becoming garden rooms with barbecues and bars and all sorts of things and lights in it. And so they could be quite noisy. The other thing is that one thing about Hale and Heath End, which is still lovely, is that we have mixed housing. And this number 12 and number 8 and number 14 are some of the biggest properties. You can see number 21 across the road, the biggest properties in the area. And around that, we've got lots of smaller houses. And behind that, we've got a little estate with tiny, tiny houses and some flats. But it's nice to have that mix. And by building this, we're changing the style of housing. We're losing one of our big houses. So I think this overlooked. So we need to look at the loss of light and the loss of privacy from 8 and 77. I do think that's a consideration. The other thing is that the design we've had, the design is not quite in line with the rest of the street. I've had a letter come in from one of the neighbours who's saying that the vast majority of the houses on Upper Hill Road present their roofs to the road and not their gables. So these houses actually are presenting their gables to the road, so it is a little bit out of character with the rest of the street. And these are quite big houses. There's an awful lot of little cottages on Upper Hale Road, little 2 up, 2 downs, but these are quite big because they've got 3 bedrooms and quite large reception rooms downstairs. So it feels a little bit big. It does feel a bit big, and the design is not in line with the rest of the street. The other thing that I've had complaints from the neighbours from is that construction work has already started. Now, I understand that obviously they were given permission to do the entrance and reduced taking the pavement down, whatever's needed. I'm not an expert. But actually what's happened is we've seen the hedgerows taken out, we've seen large amount of construction vehicles go in and create this platform, because this is a very steep road and they're creating a sort of platform. Again, I'm not an expert, so I'm not entirely sure what's going on, but we've had complaints of dust, we've had a lot of noising, and some of these construction buildings have all been parked on Upper Hale Road across the way and generally causing a bit of a nuisance. So so we need to, I know the officers have said we need a construction management plan, but I'm surprised we didn't have a construction transport management plan before they started the first lot of works, because it's already inconveniencing the neighbours quite substantially. So the question of hedgerows, I was interested to hear what Mr. Genziani said about, and I was really pleased to see that he's trying to do something about the planting and the diversity. This garden, together with the gardens at the back of number 77 and right there, is quite a good green corridor, because what, as he says, the next street, we are only about 2 minutes walk from Farnham Park here. And these gardens do provide a green corridor. Now, while we do have an assessment of the environment, it dates back to October 21. Now, we're very lucky in Upper Hale that we have big populations of badgers, and we've got quite a lot of bats that actually come around, and so I would have thought it might have been better if we'd had some sort of assessment that was a bit more recent than October, because these animals may have moved into the site into the interim. So the slope is quite a consideration, and the main complaint that everybody has said is the dangerous bend. Now, this is, you can't see on this.
Councillor, the highways have said it's okay.
Yeah, the highways have said it's okay, but this is one of the parts of Upper Hale Road which has got very, very narrow pavements, and it's actually really difficult to walk along it. And you've got these big, the highways have said it's okay, but everybody who lives there says it's actually going to, in the mornings, they're not going to have a problem because it's normally it's back up from the traffic lights at the bottom, but they're going to find it quite difficult, I think, to turn right out of that site. They might be able to turn left, but it's going to be quite difficult to turn right. But then we have had a number of complaints about that as well. So to sum up, this has felt like it is overdevelopment. This is very big development. It's taking away one of the bigger houses in Upper Hale. It's blocking off a green corridor. It's overlooking the neighbours and infringing on both their privacy and applying a lot more light to their areas. It's on a dangerous bend, and the work has already started and caused a number of complaints. These are all the reasons why everyone, I would say possibly this site could have a development, possibly, but this I don't think is right. And I hope my fellow councillors will agree. Thank you.
I will come back to Councillor Neil again. I would point out, Councillor Dixon, that you stipulated about what might happen in the gardens. We have to deal with the applications as they stand, actually. Anyway, okay, Councillor Neil.
Thank you. I was going to make a point of clarification, really, which is why I jumped in early, but I was quite happy to defer to the ward councillor. I was looking at the satellite picture here, and that it looks as if they've felled quite a substantial tree already. And that's mentioned actually in the impact on trees, para 16. I really don't favour that sort of thing going on. And Councillor Dixon's also mentioned other preemptive work going on. Now, whether that can affect our decision making here is another matter, probably not. But I thought it would be useful to get some clarification that that's happened, and any concerns that relate to all those things. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think it is correct that there has been some felling on site, but I'd like to remind members that the trees aren't protected, unfortunately. So there is nothing that could be done to prevent that prior to the application coming in. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Edmonds and Councillor Coburn. Councillor Edmonds.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've got a concern as regards the large number of conditions imposed on this development and how they in fact will be monitored and enforced. One of the key conditions I'm concerned about is condition 12, which is as regards to producing a home that can consume 110 litres per person per day. What happens if after the completion, 150 litres of water per person per day are consumed? Do we have any sanction or do we just bite the bullet? So that's one of my major problems, is the risk to delivery of these conditions. And the second is my constant complaint that there's no restriction on building hours, which I will never endorse because I think that harm to neighbours is an essential consideration. And final question is, are we in a position so that all vehicles leaving this site can leave in forward gear? Thank you.
Right. Shall we take Councillor Coburn and Councillor Hyman? Councillor Coburn.
Thank you. It's interesting you should raise the question of timing, because I remember Councillor Isherwood and I asking frequently for it to be just standard, you know, so that we weren't looking at timing. We were just saying, you know, you cannot build antisocial times, you know, as a regular thing. So I wasn't actually going to raise that, but I do agree with you. But I have asked for it to be just for years to be standard. Right. I normally try to agree with the local committee member, especially if they've taken the trouble to call something in. But I have to say, I don't think any of the grounds that Councillor Dixon raised are planning grounds. And whereas I can fully understand why residents dislike dust and the disruption of any build, I actually think this is very good. I think it's a very good use of a piece of land. I think it's been well thought through, you know, the entrance and exit for these three properties. I've seen far worse with sort of people squeezing past and things that we've tried to turn down and gone through on appeal, with people backing out near traffic lights and doing all sorts of things. You know, if you look down the list of consultees, they all agree or haven't bothered to reply, so we have to take that as agreement. And I actually don't think this will be detrimental to the character. If you look at the street scene, I think that's what eventually sold it to me. I actually think, you know, the street scene, I know it's illustrative, but I just think that is perfectly acceptable, if not actually very, very nice. And with the, as long as we condition and make sure that the landscaping is carried out according to plan, and we keep an eye on that, because sometimes they can sort of do stuff. I don't talk about these builders, but things can go pear-shaped very quickly, and it's important to get back in and maintain the landscaping. But I actually think this is a very good use of a piece of land, brownfield land, within the Farnham boundary, and unless I hear some really strong planning reasons to turn it down, I should be supporting this.
Councillor Hyman. Councillor Keane.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree in many ways with what Councillor Coburn's just said. I think we all accept that this site can take development. It is a good site for putting housing on. And I think from what I've seen of the responses from residents, their concern is perhaps overdevelopment of the site, whether it should have two houses on it, that perhaps more in keeping with what we've already got there. I'm not a design expert, and I wouldn't want to say whether I think it's right or not. But one issue which does concern me here particularly is the car parking. I know there's no objection from the Surrey County Council highways in respect of for the access, which a lot of people think is a bad place to have more access onto the road, and they're right, it is a bad place. But nevertheless, I don't think that we'd if we were to refuse this development on the basis of going against Surrey's words there, I don't think we'd stand a hope in hell in the if it came to appeal. So even though it isn't ideal, there's lots of unideal places in the world. What is a problem for me here, and I think recognised by some of the residents, is that there's an under provision of parking, of car parking. This referred to at the bottom of pages page 24, top of page 25 of your committee papers, where it confirms that that there is an under provision here. And for me, where this site is, yeah, I was brought up at the opposite corner of Willow Way, so I'm in the top corner. So I don't know the site like the back of my hand. I didn't used to walk up and down the road that often. It wasn't on my normal route to school and things like that. But I know the area extremely well. And with Oasthouse Crescent, Oasthouse Lane opposite, you can't park. Oasthouse Crescent's already got its own parking problems on the road. And Willow Way certainly has a lot of on-road parking problems, very, very congested, particularly in the entrances. So there is nowhere except for on-site, realistically, for people to park, whether it's for parties, whether it's the Sainsbury's deliveries and Ocado and all the rest of it, and Amazon. And to me, there is one reason here why I am not pleased with what is in front of us, or totally happy with it, and that is the issue of the under provision of parking. There needs to be on this site, if anything now, particularly in view of the change that we've had to home working and people having lots of deliveries to home, that this needs an over provision, not an under provision. That the under provision is unacceptable. The only way that under provision could be considered unacceptable by members here tonight, I think, is were the lack of 5-year housing land supply to override it, but it does not override it. Paragraph 182 of the MPPF makes it absolutely clear that if you don't have an appropriate assessment, then that what it says at paragraph 21 on page 27, you see that the council's advice here to us is that paragraph 11 of the MPPF is engaged and the presumption of sustainable development applies, and that's only true if you've got a complete appropriate assessment, which means that we have to have an assessment of a scientific assessment of the effectiveness of designating Farnham Park Sang as a Farnham Park as a Sang. Do we have an assessment? No, we don't. There has never been an assessment of the effectiveness of Farnham Park Sang. So ultimately, my own position on this, I think, from the facts in front of us, and I really don't want to start throwing opinion into it, simply on the facts that there's an under provision in relation to policy. It is contrary to policy. That policy is not overridden by a tilted balance or a presumption in favour of sustainable development by virtue of paragraph 182, which states of the MPPF, which states it doesn't apply. So there's only one question really which that members have to satisfy themselves of, and that is whether an assessment of the robustness of mitigation measures has been provided. They certainly wouldn't have seen one. Because they wouldn't have had the opportunity, and that's not the developer's fault. It's a technical issue, but it's the law, and we have to comply with the law. It says competent authorities must now assess the robustness of mitigation measures through an appropriate assessment. And I want to know whether, if there's anybody who can tell us, particularly our lawyer, is willing to say on record that we have an assessment of the effectiveness of Farnham Park as Sang. If someone's brave enough to say that when we know full well it's not true, then I will change my view. But I'm quite sure that unless something turned up this afternoon that I haven't seen, what has been put on the web is not satisfactory. It's been certainly I've ripped it apart before in the past, and I'm surprised it's been regurgitated in a document today at the last minute to try and mislead us.
Councillor Hyman, we've been through this.
As far as I'm concerned, I will have to vote against this on the grounds of an under provision of parking and lack of appropriate assessment, Chairman.
I would point out that the under provision of parking is 0.5 of a space. Chris, yes.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just clarify that there's been no attempt to mislead? I know that was mentioned in the comment just a second ago. We provided the document as soon as we were able to do so, and it certainly wasn't presented in a attempt to mislead. Can you please note that? Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Keane.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, do you know, like Councillor Coburn, I have to say, I think this is a well thought out plan. I mean, the houses look good. There's good separation between them. They seem to blend in with the bigger house. And there's been good thought on planting. And I really feel that it's a really good plan, and I have no problem with it. Thank you.
Any other? Oh, all right, go on.
My only concern, I wonder what other members think, is, you know, those 3 houses do look a bit tight for the site. 2 would seem perhaps a bit more appropriate if you weren't trying to make quite as much profit out of it. And of course, if there was 2, you could perhaps resolve Councillor Hyman's concerns on the car parking. So that's my main concern. And if other members thought that was overdevelopment, I might be inclined to support. But otherwise, I think, as Councillor Coburn has said, it's an acceptable design project, etc. Thank you.
I would keep reminding members we have to deal with the application that's before us all the time. Anyway, okay, right. Now, Lara, I mean, I'd echo the view by Councillor Coburn, who mentioned that dear friend of ours who's sadly passed away, Councillor Dishwood. I think we've asked for this ourselves, actually, to be put as a standard of the working hours. So, Lara, can you put that on?
Thank you, Chair. In regards to the construction hours, they are in. I think it was just a more general comment that you wanted them in all applications.
I do apologise. Okay, do you understand?
No, Chair, unless there are any questions that have been missed that members would like me to answer.
Sorry, I did have to ask the question, how do you enforce 110 litres? Thank you.
With great difficulty, I should imagine.
Bear with me, Chair. Let me just get the condition up itself, if that's okay. Or unless you got it there. So what the condition requires is that details be submitted to and approved to confirm the dwellings have been completed to meet the requirements of 110 litres per person per day. I think it goes beyond the scope of the condition to be continually monitoring those dwellings afterwards to, there has to be a level of reasonableness as to what people can do within their properties. But the intention of that condition is to ensure that when those dwellings are constructed, that they're constructed in a good starting place where they would meet that requirement. Thank you, Chair.
Further comment, then we'll move to the recommendation. Yeah. Dixon, you all right?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I just wanted to come back to what Carol Coburn said about not having any planning reasons. But I did actually, was trying to tell a story. This is not a good picture because the road is much steeper than this picture shows. It really is a lot steeper than this. So can we go back to the diagram on page 36? Because the problem is the problem with residential amenity is against severe loss of light and privacy to number 77 on Willow Road and number 8 on Upper Hill Road. Those people are going to have their lives blighted by this development. And it's all very well for Carol to sit there and say not some planning reason, but I've sat here for hours and hours and hours listening to similar arguments take place in South Farnham. So this is really, these people are losing out a very serious impact on them. So the residential amenity is quite serious. And we haven't really talked about the fact that these people are being overlooked and losing out on their light. We've also talked about the visual and design amenity, which is another aspect. And for this, I'd like to talk to you about the Farnham design statement for Hale and Heath End, which states that new development should reflect the pattern and density of existing houses in Hale, and further infill development should be discouraged. That's Article 10.11.1. And then also 10.11.16, existing problems with traffic should not be exacerbated by inappropriate or excessive development. And then 10.11.10, the effect of cumulative development on the current infrastructure should be carefully considered. And what that is referring to is the sewage and the drainage on Upper Hill Road, which is already known to flood and to exceed the drains or when we have serious rainfall. So I believe we can make the case both as an impact on residential amenity and based on Farnham's design statement, which says that this house it should be discouraged because this is an infill development. Plus the fact we have half a car down on the parking. And you may say this is only half a car, but there are no car parks near to here. There is no on-street parking. And so what again will happen is either they're going to inconvenience their neighbours by parking, I don't know even where, And so, and although there is a bus stop actually on that stretch of road, but the buses are only once every half hour. And when you live in that part of Hale, you're just about 2 miles from the centre. You will end up using your car most of the time. Thank you. I hope that clarifies why this is something that we can disagree with. And I think it's very well for that member from Hazelmere and members from South Farnham to say this is lovely. Of course, it's.
Excuse me, Councillor Dixon. Councillor Dixon, you can't make an allegation like that.
Yes, but I think we really should.
No. You can't make allegations like that about other members.
I did indicate earlier, I thought it was absolutely outrageous to suggest that if this were coming in South Farnham, and now we've included Hazelmere, that Councillor Keane and I would have come to a different decision. Absolute nonsense and grossly rude and unfair. Because what we're doing is looking at a planning application and trying to see which policies it complies with, which ones it doesn't, and whether or not on balance it's acceptable. And I am sorry, I actually think wherever this were, and to suggest that anything in South Farnham like this I would not have supported is quite frankly outrageous.
Yeah,
Mr. Chairman, I would like to.
Can I just apologise? I apologise. I apologise. I apologise. I apologise.
Right, thank you. Yeah, the recommendation, well, to pass it really, recommendation here, that subject to the completion of a section 106 agreement to secure SANG and SAM contribution section conditions 1 to 16 and informs 1 to 10 permission granted. And the recommendation B is that in the event that the requirements of recommendation are not met, permission be refused. Those in favour, please raise their hands. And those again. Abstain?
Thank
Followed
you.
up to 11?
Thank you, Chairman. I have made sure it adds to 11 this time. So 8 in favour, 3 against and no abstentions. So therefore the application is carried.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you. Good wishes for that. Right, we move on to the last application tonight, which is WA 2022-000293. The land east of Broadway 186 centred coordinates 486985 147072 Crooksbury Road, Farnham. Erection of a stable and storage building, and the officer to present road is Philippa Spies. Philippa, your turn.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. As Councillor Beaman has just said, the application is for the erection of a stable and storage building. Turning to the location plan, the application site is located to the south of Crooksbury Road, accessed via bridleway number 186, which leads to and joins the North Downs Way long distance footpath to the south. And that's why I've included this OS map, just to show that that is the North Downs there, and the application site is up here. To the northeast of the site are residential dwellings. To the south and southeast, there is open countryside, including a former landfill site and Runfold South Quarry. The site comprises an area of hard standing and an existing stable block on the site. The aerial photograph better demonstrates the context of the site. We can see that it is well separated from the residential properties to the northeast. Turning to the site photographs, photograph A is taken from the west, showing the existing stables and access. Photograph B is taken from the southwest, looking towards the existing stables and the field fencing. Photograph C is taken from the southwest, looking towards the existing stables and the field fencing and into the wider grazing area. Photograph D is taken from the northwest, looking towards the wider grazing area to the south of the stables. E is taken from the north, looking down the bridleway, which runs along the western boundary of the application site. And F is taken from the south, looking up the bridleway, showing the access. So what's relevant here is the planning history for the site. Permission was granted at appeal in 2017 for the change of use of the land from agricultural to equestrian use and the erection of a 5 loose box stable building for the purposes of keeping horses. Officers are satisfied that the lawful use of the land is equestrian following the implementation of this permission. Permission was refused in 2021 for the erection of a stable building. This building measured 21.8 metres wide, 7.8 metres deep, with a roof height of 5 metres, and the external floor area was 170 metres squared. Reading Agricultural Consultants were consulted on the previous application and concluded that the previous stable building was far larger in floor area than was necessary for the applicant's requirements and for a holding of that size. The eaves height at 3 metres was considered to be higher than the existing stable block and not necessary, as machinery, if required to be stored, could be accessed via the gable ends of the building. Reading Agricultural also considered the proposed siting opposite and at some distance from the existing stables to have little practical merit, favouring an L-shaped arrangement or half square shapes, noting that this would benefit animal welfare. On the basis of the size and scale of the previously proposed building, it was considered that the building, in combination with the existing block, would be at odds with the rural character of the area and the intrinsic character of the countryside. It should be noted that Reading Agricultural Consultants did not object to the principle of providing additional stabling and storage on site, but that the size and scale of the stable building proposed was excessive for the needs and requirements of the applicant. So the main matter of consideration today for the current application is if the previous reasons for refusal have been overcome or not. So turning to the proposal, this slide shows the proposed block plan. It shows the existing concrete pad with the proposed new stables sited perpendicularly to the existing stables. In light of Reading Agricultural Consultants' comments, officers consider that the proposed siting is better related to the existing stables and more appropriate in terms of animal welfare. Turning to the proposed elevations, the building would have a traditional stable building appearance and would be constructed with a brick plinth, plain tile roof and timber cladding with timber doors. And as I said, it would be sited perpendicularly to the existing block. The building would be 20.69 metres wide, 7.8 metres deep, with an eaves height of 2.86 metres. The maximum roof ridge height would be 4.94. Turning to the proposed floor plan, the floor area would be 99.83 metres squared. The building would provide 2 loose boxes, a mare and foal weaning box, a tack and storage room, and hay and feed store. The size and height of the loose boxes is considered to be acceptable and not excessive. It's in line with the British Horse Society guidelines. It's noted that the large areas of vacant space previously proposed have been removed. So turning to the main matters of consideration, as previously noted, the main matter for consideration is whether the previous reasons for refusal have been addressed. As set out in the officer report, officers consider that the proposal has overcome the concerns raised by Reading Agricultural Consultants and by officers in the previous refusal. With regard to retained policy RD3 of Local Plan 2002, officers are satisfied that the proposed stables are sufficiently small in scale and their location, design and materials are appropriate to the character and appearance of the area. The proposed design has a traditional appearance in keeping with the existing stable block, and the proposed materials are acceptable. The proposal would not give rise to significant noise and disturbance to the occupiers of neighbouring residential properties. The proposal is therefore considered to be in accordance with retained policy RD13. With regard to design and impact on visual amenity, the AGLV and the countryside, the current proposal being much smaller and of a more appropriate design would be more appropriate for the applicant's requirements and would respect the rural character of the immediate area. It's acknowledged that public views of the stable would be possible from the bridleway to the west. However, these views would be contained. The proposed building would be seen within the context of existing built form and hard standing and would not appear unduly prominent nor dominate views from the immediate area. The proposal would therefore be in keeping with the character of the immediate area and would respect the landscape and intrinsic character and beauty of the countryside, the AGLV, and the area of high landscape value and sensitivity. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right, before I open it to members, I would remind members we're here to discuss planning issues only. And in fact, the fact that they've alleged to overcome all issues. Right,
Yes, thank you, Chairman. The impact on the AGLV is considerable from this application as it takes the development to over 8 stables plus large storage areas. Already, there is insufficient grazing for this number of horses, as stated by the RAC, and is detrimental to the biodiversity of the area. There's more stabling here than I've seen an Olympic event rider's yard. Stabling is not required as a norm. I should know, I have horses, and temporary field shelters are more appropriate and sustainable in this area of high landscape value and sensitivity. I also look at planning application WA/2021-03156, when the countryside access objects to a certain development because it's going over public bridleway 186. Access to a site via bridleway 186, it is illegal to drive a motor vehicle on a public bridleway unless private rights or any other legal authority exist. In order to construct this dwelling and for subsequent owners to be able to access it by motor vehicle, it would be necessary for the applicants to provide evidence that such private rights exist. Have we actually seen that these people have private rights on this bridleway? Because I can't find anything in the papers. On a side note, I have to query why horses require a post box. I have never found a horse that can read. Sorry, I'll be voting against this. Thank you.
Answer the question posed by Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. I would add that the existing use of the site is equestrian, and the applicant does use that site currently for the use that is being proposed. They're just seeking additional stabling, so they do have access to use the site as they're currently doing so. And I would note that we are here to assess the stables. The post box is not under consideration here. We're just here to discuss the stable. Thank you, Chair.
Right, any other councillor wish to speak? Oh, sorry, Councillor Edmund.
Thank you. As with the last application, please can you advise how these conditions will be monitored and enforced, specifically the concern about contaminated land?
Shall we take Councillor Corbyn and give Councillor?
Yeah, I'm very doubtful about this one. I share Councillor Martin's reservations about it. Interestingly, the question of timber-clad buildings in areas that you want to protect. They were talking about AOMB at the LPP2 examination this afternoon, was actually raised, you know, because of how you can make sure that what's happening on an equestrian site or an agricultural site doesn't become something else by default. And I just reading in the conditions, I'm not really quite sure. And I know you'll say, well, it's only a stable, so therefore the conditions only apply to that. But I do have a worry about overdevelopment of this area. We do try to protect the areas of high visual sensitivity and high landscape value. You know, it's part of the policy of the FMP, and it's how we allocated development sites very, very strictly. And it did test that it did stand the test of time, both examinations and in the courts. So, you know, it was a robust policy, and it remains. So I can see that this is smaller. I'm not sure it overcome it's difficult. Has it really overcome the reason that I wouldn't have supported the previous one? I still need some convincing. Thank you.
Do you want to wrap up the question, Councillor Edmonds, and any points you may wish to make, Councillor Corbyn?
Thank you, Chair. In terms of condition 5, it's a pre-commencement condition, so it requires details to be submitted and agreed. I mean, in terms of enforcement, that's not what you're here to consider today, but there is no reason on the face of that condition that it doesn't meet the test of a condition. So I'm happy that that is a appropriate condition, and enforcement matters are a different, you know, not for you to consider today. So yeah, we would expect that to be complied with. Thank you, Chair.
Does she speak? Councillor Hyman?
Yes, I do share the concerns. I think the wider concerns of creep development really in this area, and the problem that I have with this is that I don't think that an objection to this development to this on grounds of harm to the AGLV and the AOMB, it's been pretty much firmly established that those give us very little protection, and I'm not sure that we would be able to put forward a good defence if we were to refuse on those grounds. Obviously, we're being told that this isn't going to end up as a housing site or whatever, but there's another application which was referred to by Councillor Martin, the 3180 or 3156. I just wondered whether there has been an objection which states this application should be considered in conjunction with that development. Can we have some advice from officers, please, as to whether or not we should be considering it in conjunction, whether there are any cumulative impacts or elements whereby in law or in policy we should actually be considering the interrelationship of the two developments there. Otherwise, I tend to think, from what the officers have said, and if I trust what's said there, that there are not sufficient reasons for this to be refused, even though it isn't. I think in many of our members' eyes, it isn't ideal.
Yeah, Philippa, do you want to answer the question put by Councillor Hyman?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Hyman. What hopefully will give some comfort is if I go to the planning history. This slide here was what officers previously refused. The building was much bigger, did have a kind of domestic appearance, I would say. I wasn't the officer at the time, but I would say it does have a more sort of domestic residential appearance there. It's much taller. It also, I don't know if you can see my cursor here. The floor plan had this quite large area of basically vacant space, which Reading Agriculture identified as being unnecessary for the proposed use. So if we now turn to what's being proposed now, it has a much more kind of equestrian appearance, and all of that vacant space has been removed so that it just serves its function. A measurement that I took earlier when I was preparing, bear with me. So the British Horse Society indicates that a loose box should be 6.7 metres by 6.7 metres minimum. And these are only very slightly bigger, these loose boxes. So I'm trying to point here, just very slightly bigger than that. So they're not excessive in any way for the recommended size of loose box. I'm turning to the point about the application that was referred to by residents. As I said in my presentation, we do have to assess what's in front of us here. The application referred to, I believe, has been withdrawn. I don't know the reasons for that, and they wouldn't be relevant anyway. But we are just here to assess whether these stables are appropriate, and that's all we can consider here. Thank you.
And could I just ask you to confirm whether there's any possibility that this could, that there might be permitted development rights that would allow this to be turned into housing or partly into habitable accommodation? I mean, obviously there are other constraints, particularly habitats and whatever, that would certainly need to be considered. I would just want to be very happy that we don't need to add in any conditions in respect of use of this, because we are consenting this use, and so that excludes other uses. But I want to be absolutely certain there aren't any backdoor methods that could be used, which we could shut off at this point if we were to add a suitable condition accordingly. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Hyman. So the use the lawful use of the site is equestrian, not agricultural, so that would remove the agricultural prior approval concern. And we have condition 9, sorry, I'm a bit all over the place here. Condition 9 has conditioned that it would be used solely for private equestrian, not commercial. I appreciate that isn't residential, but it is limiting the use of the building to private equestrian. Thank you.
Right. I have two councillors who want to come back. Councillor Keane hasn't spoken. Yeah, have you spoken? No.
I was going to ask if we're going to put conditions on, can we have existence of private roads rights must be provided before construction starts to avoid committing offences under Section 34 of the Road Traffic Act, driving on a public bridle way.
Thank you, Chair. I think Lewis will probably be able to confirm as well, but I would have thought that that would be separate legislation and be a civil matter, so it wouldn't be something that we would condition details of rights of way be submitted or details of rights of access be submitted. So I think that's largely a private matter and wouldn't be appropriate for a condition. I'm sure Lewis can clarify that as well. Thank you, Chair.
But sorry, the Surrey Access team would like that as a condition on the other application.
Yeah, we're sitting into this application, Councillor Martin, and you know, Lewis, do you want to comment on this?
Thank you, Chairman. I agree with what Chris said. I think your concerns are ones relating to private law issues that may or may not be a concern for the owners of that land and or the applicant. So as far as I'm concerned, I don't think that condition would be appropriate. I haven't seen the condition that was requested that you just mentioned, but notwithstanding that, I agree with Chris. Thank you.
In fact, to be fair to the officers, I mean, because it's said by somebody else it should be conditioned on an application, doesn't mean to say that's right, does it? Councillor, oh right, okay, 3 people want to speak. Councillor Keane, Councillor Coburn, Councillor Neil. I think. Councillor Keane.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I do somewhat agree with Councillor Hyman about a condition that this will always remain as stabling, because we all know that things can change and then you get applications to change of use. So is it possible to put a condition on, a definite condition, that this will always be for equestrian or stabling?
Yes, it's there, isn't it?
Chairman, I'm satisfied with the previous response that we've received, actually, in respect of the use in condition 10.
Councillor Coburn.
Yeah, sorry, Chairman, I'm just a bit confused about size here, and I'm not desperately good at mental arithmetic. But reading the difference, the one that was refused, right, was 21.8 metres wide, and this is 20.69, so not a huge difference. The depth of the one that was refused was 7.8 metres, and this is 7.87. Am I reading it correctly? And the roof height was going to be 4.94 when we turned down one of 5. And the floor area they come up with for this one is 99.83 square meters. And the external floor area was of the previous refused one was 170 square meters. And I mean, just looking at it quickly, it doesn't strike me as that quite works out. And I can't really see, if we're dealing with harm to the visual amenity, it strikes me that this building is not actually significantly lower or less significant in the area. You know, whatever the figures come up with. I mean, one says floor area and the other says external floor area. So Whether that's confusing me, I don't know. But I can't see a huge difference in the dimensions. That's my problem. I'm trying to read page 44 and page 47 at the same time.
Might just do the condition. Thank you, Chairman. I think one of the questions that that has come up is whether there's adequate control in terms of conditions for the fact that it would remain as a question. I mean, it would be development if it was to materially change in use, and there's no, you can't remove permitted development rights there are no permitted development rights for the things that you're raising concerns with. So we can't remove permitted development rights for anything that you're raising. So on that basis, I would say that there's that condition that Philippa referred to earlier, where it says that it shall be for stabling. I don't think there's anything else we can really add at this stage where there's no removal of permitted development rights, because there is no permitted development right that we've highlighted to take away. So on that basis, I would say that there probably isn't a reasonable or necessary condition we could add on that basis, because it is secured through the consent as it is. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just looking at that now to make sure I get it right.
Sorry, Chairman, I should have turned my microphone on. I think, like Councillor Coburn, I'm having trouble trying to work out whether the reasons have been overcome, but put it that way, put simply. It's very, very difficult here, and I'm hoping that perhaps an officer can, who knows this in a lot more detail than I do, can explain to me, very simply, this was the reason and that's been overcome by, because it isn't clear from the report I've got in front of me in a way that I, of a bird of very little brains, or bear of very little brain, can understand.
New news?
Yeah, we are. Sorry.
Okay.
Just while I'm checking the measurements, I would say that a large part of the bulk and mass of this refused application was due to the vacant space, and that space required the roof height to be as such. And I'm just double checking the roof height. So the refuse scheme was 21. This is going by, just for speed, the measurements that the plans have on them. And that was 21 metres by 7.89 with a maximum roof height of 5 metres. And the current application is 20.6 wide, 7.86 deep, and the height, sorry, is 4.9. But the scale and bulk came from the vacant space within the stable building that really added that, coupled with its kind of domestic residential design, was the concern in the previous refusal.
Yes, I'm not phoning my husband to book the gin. I've just done some maths on my calculator, and I make the floor area of the application 162.83, and the one that we refused 170.04. I take the officer's point that that was only part of it, but the height's the same and the floor space is not to me, well, it's measurably different, but it's not wildly different from what was already there. That's my confusion. So I'm not sure that we have overcome the reason that we turned it down last time.
I would just say that all of this space was vacant. So the measurements, if you do width by depth, would not, because this is, so I'm not being very clear, I apologise, but this is L-shaped, and this isn't built form, this bit, whereas in the previous one, all of that bit was built form that had no functional purpose for the stabling, which really contributed to the bulk and mass of looking at that front gable element of it.
Councillor Neil.
Thank you. I haven't done the maths that other members here have done, but looking at the proposed floor plan, it seems to be certainly smaller than the existing building, maybe slightly smaller than the one that was turned down. It seems to be a better design and less housey. So I think I'm going to find it difficult to oppose the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Right. Conditions 1 to 10 and voice 1 to 9, permission be granted. Those in favour, please raise their hand. Against? Abstain. With the result.
Thank you, Chairman. That's 4 in favour, 6 against and 1 abstention. Therefore, the application's refused.
Right. Alton, yes.
Yes, I propose that the application be refused. Quite frankly, I know it's not up to me to say why, if I have a second, but as far as I can see, you know, we haven't overcome the previous reasons.
That's actually, Philippa, please.
I have the previous reasons for refusal here, which I can put on the screen and try and share.
Is it as page 47?
Looking at them, the policies are the same as now as they were then.
With that wording, okay. So we vote on that. Those in favour of refusing on the basis. Against? Abstain. Hands. Those against? And abstain. You abstain, I say. As long as it adds up to 11, all right, I think.
Okay, Chairman, so that is 6 in favour, none against and 5 abstentions.
Avoided refuse for those reasons. Thank you. Right. There's no more items to discuss tonight. Nothing in exclusion. And I will give you a pre-warning though. August may be a bit heavy and we may need 2 meetings. I'll let you know. Okay. Thank you. you very much. Safe journey, everybody.